A non-trivial question to ask about a company is, what does it do? For example, what does Apple do? I mean, sure, we know there are Apple-branded phones and computers that we can buy. And it leads us to think that Apple makes and sells phones and computers. And which is not entirely incorrect. But that is not entirely correct either, because Apple does not make the phones, or the computers, which carry its brand, and are sold as Apple phones and computers. Many of those devices are made by a company called Foxconn. And other companies like TSMC supply parts like the chip, for the phones and the computers. A similarly interesting question to ask is, what does Samsung do? In the shops, we can find phones, laptops, TVs, washing machines, fridge, dishwasher, and many other appliances. Samsung offers so many phones, and they sell in such large numbers, not just in the US and Europe, but in other large population centers, like India and China. Looking at that, one would think that Samsung is a company, primarily making and selling phones. And one would be wrong. It is strange to think that Samsung is not a phone company, even though they sell a ton of them all over the world. They are not even an appliance company, even though they sell all kinds of appliances, across the world. What Samsung is primarily a memory chip company. It makes and sells DRAM chips, which go into computers, for temporary storage, and NAND chips, which go into phones and increasingly, computers, for permanent storage. These memory chips earn 20% of Samsung's $200 billion revenue, which is not too far away from Apple's revenue, the most valuable company in the history of the world. But here's the kicker. These memory chips earn nearly half of the company's profits. That is amazing. It means that everything else that Samsung makes and sells, the phones, the TVs, the ACs, all the appliances, and the displays, put together, they earn only as much as the humble memory chips. All this is to say that Samsung is a memory chip business, and everything else that it does, is just gravy. Samsung knows that, and they want to make more and different and more complicated and more costly chips. Not very different from what Intel, or TSMC does. The other thing about Samsung that pops the brain, is that they are sitting on a hoard of money. A whole $100 billion of it. If you think about it, it is not really a surprise, because they are pulling in $200 billion in revenue, and their operations generate over $50 billion in cash every year. Of course, a lot of that cash is invested back in the business. For example, Samsung buys a lot of equipment and machinery. In 2020, they spent well over $30 billion buying equipment, and they are expected to spend similar amounts in the near future as well. No, what would have been surprising is, if their hoard of cash was any smaller. An interesting, though deeply futile, thought experiment would be to get our minds around the question, how much is $100 billion? To say that it is a lot of money, is trivial. If we are to spend $1 a second, it'll take us about 11 days to spend $1 million. At the same rate, spending $1 billion would take us a little less than 32 years. A 100 billion will take close to 3,200 years. Let that sink in a bit. Spending $100 billion will take 3,200 years. Isaac Newton formulated the laws of motion 334 years ago. The Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan began 800 years ago, around the same time the Magna Carta came into existence. The first government-issued paper money circulated in China 900 years ago. Prophet Muhammad died 1,300 years ago. Jesus of Nazareth died 2,000 years ago, around the same time the Roman Empire began. One of the earliest centers of higher learning, Taxila University in India, was founded 3,000 years ago, around the same time King Solomon, along with Judaism, rose to power near Jerusalem. All that is to say that $100 billion is a lot of money, and that successful modern corporations like Apple and Samsung are fabulously well off. So that's it for this one. Do consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, as it is a great morale booster for this tiny channel, and I'll see you in the next one.